It's finally here. Your AYN Thor has arrived after many months of waiting, and you might have many questions about how to actually set the device up. I factory reset my own device, so allow me to show you from scratch the best way to set up the AYN Thor. Just before we get started, for this video and any other videos I do where I cover the AYN Thor, everything will be done on the device itself. I will not be using a PC whatsoever. So here is my Thor. I have just performed a factory reset. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through the initial setup process. So in this guide, we won't actually be getting to the emulator setup side. I'll just be showing you how the Thor works and some essential apps and websites that we need to visit first and foremost. So once you boot the device, you'll get this little setup wizard. This is where we're just going to enter things like our Wi-Fi and things like that. So just follow it through as you would any other device. So when you get to this screen, it's going to ask you if you want the AOSP launcher, that's the default Android one. And it's also going to ask you if you want the Thor launcher. Personally, I think the Thor launcher is a little bit terrible, so I'm just going to be focusing on the AOSP one. You can also choose your navigation style, so if you are used to using Android phones, the gesture is where we do a lot of swipes and things like that to access our task manager, or you can do the standard 3-button navigation. For these devices, I advise just sticking with good old gestures. And here we are, welcome to your AYN Thor. So let's just take a look around the UI. So if you've used an Android phone before, this will be very familiar to you. If you haven't, do not worry, that's what I'm here for. So we've got our apps, we've got a little clock widget there, we've got an app launcher at the bottom as well. If we swipe across, we can access all our other pages of apps. So for the device itself, we have obviously all our face buttons, we have our triggers on the back. We also have this AYN button here, so if we press this, we can control our brightness on both screens or an individual screen, and we can control our top and bottom volumes. We can also disable the display, so we can only show the top screen once I've disabled that warning. If you want to get back off this, just press that button again, and you can also do the same thing and hide the top screen. If we go to our task button here, this will open your task manager where you can close any apps. And then we also have our settings, which you might have seen before. This basically shows you your current FPS temperatures, fans, and your CPU, your GPU usage, your power drainage, and your RAM usage. So this is very good for accessing some quick settings. So let's have a look at these quick settings. Auto lock here, this is a focus mode. What this means is which screen are these buttons controlling. So if we leave it on auto lock, whichever screen we tap will be the one that is currently active. If you prefer to lock it to a specific screen, then you can use either the top screen or bottom screen options. Basically, it means that if you lock it to the top screen, it will always focus the top screen, so the buttons will never control the bottom screen, and vice versa. We also have our performance profiles. So for the most part, you can just leave this in standard. However, you can also boost this for medium and high performance if you're playing slightly more demanding games. Next, we have our fan modes. So you can turn the fan off completely, which I wouldn't advise. You can enable quiet mode, where the fan runs at a consistent speed and it's very, very quiet. You can enable sports mode, where it runs at full speed and it's very, very loud. Or you can enable smart mode. Now with smart mode, it is a little bit finicky, but I'll show you how to edit the smart curve. Basically, with smart mode, we can set the fan at a specific speed depending on the device's temperature. In terms of temperatures, currently it is at 48 degrees, which is great. These chips have thermal throttling, so basically if it gets too hot, it will start to throttle itself, so it helps protect it from burning out. 70 to 80 degrees is a perfectly normal temperature range. I see a lot of people doing things like hardware mods to improve the temperatures, and personally, I don't think it's necessary. If you start seeing temperatures in the 90s, then all you need to do is adjust your smart fan curve so it runs the fan faster at higher temperatures. You can also enable your LEDs from here. So we will be exploring some apps, so you can customize the colors. You can have both the LEDs the same color or different colors. Have a play around with this. You can adjust the brightness of an individual, or you can adjust the saturation. it is entirely up to you. I will be covering an app that has greater control over the LEDs, not one I use personally, but it is kind of cool and gimmicky. We'll just leave it on a nice pale purple for now. You can also enable disable vibration by tapping there, and then for controller style, so for standard style, that is our Nintendo style, so A on the right, B on the bottom, so on and so forth. You can also change this to Xbox style, where A is on the bottom, B is on the right, and so on and so forth. I tend to set this as a specific profile, which I'll get to shortly, so if I'm playing PC games, it defaults to an Xbox style layout, and I go by muscle memory. Also, to get some additional options, if we swipe down from the top here, we have our other options. So there's some here, so you can see I'm connected to my internet. I can also change my performance from here rather than using the bottom screen. And for our fan, I can turn it off, I can turn it to quiet. If I tap this little arrow, I press smart and I press edit, I can edit my smart fan curve. So you can see here, the fan speed will be at 20% when the device is at 45 degrees. For the most part, this fan curve is okay, although I'd say change the reference to the GPU rather than the CPU, and then you might just have to gently bring the fan down to about here. Obviously, if it goes to 105 degrees, then you'd want it running at full whack, but it running at about 40% speed whilst at 85 is perfectly fine. Just another note on the fans is that the fans, the exhausts, are on the back here, so do make sure that they have enough airway. So if you're docking this, for example, or you've left it running, just make sure it's got a little bit of a gap so it doesn't overheat. So you can change your LED mode like we did before, you can change your controller style like I just showed you, you can change your L2 and R2 mode. So basically what this means is you can change between analog, digital, or both. If a trigger is analog, you imagine you're driving a car. If you touch the pedal lightly, like that, it's going to go slowly. If you ram it all the way down, it's going to speed up. For digital, it's a simple on-off. So it'll go, I'm driving, I'm not driving. So I advise just leaving it on both. We can also enable our 120 Hz refresh mode just by tapping our display. Do be wary though that this bottom screen isn't 120 Hz, so if you're scrolling, you might see some screen tearing as it's trying to keep up. Not a major issue, just something to be aware of. Totally harmless, totally common. So there's also this option for floating icon. So you might see at the right hand side here, we've got our floating icon. This appears when you've opened up an emulator or a game, and it can be a little bit annoying. So what is the floating icon? The floating icon is a way for us to automatically set per app profiles. So for example, if we swipe in from the right, we get this little screen. So I'm currently in RetroArch as I'm in the midst of recording my RetroArch tutorial as well. But you can see here that we have some options to follow global for our fan and our processor. Now, if you're emulating a PC game, for example, through Game Native, you might want to up your power to high performance mode. So if you do that, it's going to automatically enable high performance mode whenever you load up Game Native. So it's a little bit easier than manually having to change the settings every time. So I don't advise disabling this floating icon completely. Instead, what I advise is if you tap the little arrow next to it and you drag that transparency all the way down to 0, you still get the functionality without that big ugly icon at the right hand side. So I'm going to enable Force Landscape. Even though it's a landscape device, sometimes you might find that some apps, for example Android apps, might try and flip to portrait mode. It's very annoying. So before we start downloading some apps, we'll just take a quick look at some settings. So we can go to our settings app, and then here's where you can connect to new Wi-Fi's. You can set your default apps if you have a specific browser or a specific front end, which I'll cover in separate videos. You can also manage your storage from here. So like I said, this is a complete factory reset, so there are currently no games on here. So one thing we can do in the settings, I think this green is a little bit ugly. It used to be a nice purple, so I'm going to change it back to a nice purple. So if we go to our settings, go to wallpaper, wallpaper and style, to basic colors, and we can just pick a nice accent color. I believe it was this purple was the original one. That looks about right. I much prefer this to that ugly snot green yellow that they use. So most of these settings work the exact same as they do on an Android phone or tablet. However, there is this Thor settings, which allows us to set the equalizer. So one of the problems with the Thor is the sound quality is terrible. However, I'll be showing you an app later that allows us to fix the sound. You can use this if you like, it does help somewhat, but there's a much better solution. So also in these Thor settings, if we scroll all the way down, then you can enable OLED Ultra Black mode, and this will just really take advantage of the OLED screen. And then if we look at OLED screen protection, what you'll find is if I leave the device untouched for about 30 seconds, you get this OLED refresh screen, which is a little bit obnoxious and kind of annoying, and also in the long term can actually wear out your OLED faster. You can enable it, it does not need to be done every 30 seconds, that is far too frequent. I believe this is a factory mode that has just been kind of pushed to public because people were concerned about the OLED. My advice, disable the refresher and leave the pixel shifter enabled. What this will do is it will ever so subtly move pixels back and forth, and you won't even notice it. So I changed this to 300 seconds or 5 minutes, so you don't even notice it. It helps keep your OLED nice and safe without having this big obnoxious static bar going across the screen. So you might have noticed this ugly white bar, so we're going to get rid of that. So to do that, we're going to go to Settings, we're going to go to System, looking for Gestures, and then if we press the System Navigation button, scroll down a little bit, and then where it says Gesture Navigation, we're going to tap that Settings cog, and then if we scroll down, we can just untick Home Bar Settings at the bottom of Gesture Navigation, and voila, it's gone. I have noticed that some apps it does seem to reappear in. I believe that's an app side setting, not an Android side setting. And finally, this is totally optional. Some of the apps I cover do require developer mode to be enabled. So to do that, if you come to About, scroll all the way down to where it says build number, and we're just going to tap that 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I am now a developer and I didn't need to go to university for it. So with that, if we go back to our system, we now have this developer options menu. I won't be covering anything to do with that in this video, it's just something to be aware of for future videos, as some apps do require this to be enabled. Okay, so enough messing about, so let's get some apps. So firstly, I advise if you have a Google Play account, sign into the Google Play Store, as we're going to get a File Explorer, which I recommend because it's infinitely better than the stock one. If you're happy to use the stock one, you are more than welcome to, but I much prefer this one. So the first app I'm going to download is Solid Explorer, which is my file manager of choice. It has split screens, a built-in FTP server. If that means nothing to you, don't worry, I'll be explaining it in videos. So we're just going to install that. And I also recommend this app, ZArchiver. So if you download games or texture packs and they are in a zip folder, this is the best app to unzip those files. So we have those apps on our home screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press and hold and drag my Solid Explorer over to my home screen. The way we can manage our home screen is if we press and hold, we can drag an app to the top. If it's a built-in app like the Files app, you'll get this option to remove, and that'll just delete the icon without uninstalling the app. You can also see here, if I try and move ZArchiver or Solid Explorer, I also have the option to uninstall, so you can just drag and drop to uninstall any apps. I'm also going to get rid of that clock widget. Okie dokie, there we go. So first up, we're going to grab an app called Obtainium. This is available totally free on GitHub, which is a website where a lot of our apps will be downloaded from, but it basically allows you to download emulators and things like that, and it can manage them for you and update them in the background. So we're going to go to Chrome, we're going to search for GitHub Obtainium, and you want this link here, imranr98/Obtainium, and then we're going to come to the releases at the side, and we're going to grab whatever the latest version is. In this case, version 1.4.3. And then if we go to our assets, we're looking for just this app release.apk. APK files are our Android app package files. Anytime we're downloading apps off GitHub, you want to make sure it's an APK file. So we'll grab that one. And then we can open it from here, or you can go to your File Explorer, go to your download folder, and it will be in there. So we're going to open it using the package installer. And then some apps will ask for extra permissions, in which case we'll just hit settings, click that little toggle, and then the installation pop-up will begin. And you can see Obtainium has also popped up on the bottom screen. So we're not going to open that just yet because Obtainium doesn't come with any apps pre-installed. We can import a file which will give us the list of apps. So we're going to use the RJNY emulation pack. So we're going to go back to Google, RJNY emulation pack. And there we are, this top link, RJNY Obtainium emulation pack. So this isn't an APK file, it's a JSON, which is just essentially a list of instructions for Obtainium to follow. So there are two versions. Obviously for the Thor, we're going to want the dual screen version. The only difference is some of the apps that are specific for dual screen devices aren't in the standard version, but the emulators and things, they're all the same. So we're going to grab that JSON. We don't need to open it or install it, we're just going to import it into Obtainium. So we can launch Obtainium from here, or we can swipe up and we can grab Obtainium. We're going to allow it to send us notifications because it'll inform us when it's updated apps in the background. So you can see at the moment I've got nothing in there. So if we tap import, we're going to press Obtainium import, and then you should see that JSON that we just downloaded. So as soon as we tap that, you can see here 56 apps plus their settings. We've got all our emulators that we'll be covering. We've got some of our front ends. They're not all available from Obtainium. I'll cover that in future videos. We've also got our apps for PC emulation. We've got some apps for PC streaming. So just to demonstrate how an app works in Obtainium, we'll get RetroArch because that'll be our main emulator for the majority of systems. So all we need to do is come to here and then press install, and it'll do all that for us. So when that's done, we're going to need to let Obtainium install the apps. We should get a little pop-up when we go back. There we go. We're going to install RetroArch, and you can see that it's in my app launcher, and it is also down here. Just a final note on the home screen, if you want to add this to your home screen, swipe up, press and hold, and then just drag, and then you can just pop it down there so we can have it pinned before we start investigating front ends and things like that. Because we're going to be setting everything up first, and then later videos we'll look at the front ends and you can decide which one you want. And finally, before we wrap up, we are going to look at some accounts that I recommend you get. These are optional, but if you use front ends or you're interested in achievements, then in my opinion, they are a necessity. So first up, we're looking at SteamGridDB. This is going to work with our front ends to scrape the artwork and the metadata. SteamGridDB has probably some of the best artwork. It's got a lot of fan creations and things like that. It is a godsend. You don't need a specific account for this, you just need to log in with your Steam account. So you can do this with the normal way you'd log in, so you can scan your QR code with your SteamGuard app. And then once you've signed in, if you come to this little burger menu at the top right, press on your profile name and go to Preferences. There's a little tab here called API. Now, an API key is essentially a password to let apps communicate with one another. So we are going to be using that API key for some of our scrapers for front ends like ESU, Cocoon, anything that uses SteamGridDB basically. Next up we have ScreenScraper.fr or ScreenScraper. This is probably the best scraper going. It has absolutely tons and tons and tons of artwork, gameplay videos, manuals. It is the best repository for any of that metadata. So it is a free account to start, but if we look here, the free account is rate limited. So if you give $1 a month, you get access to 50,000 scrapes a day, which for the most of you is probably more than you'd need. I gave them a tenner because this is something I've used for many years, and I get 100,000 scrapes requests per day, which is more than I ever need. And I also get to support the guys doing some excellent work. And you also get access to the extra threads. What that means is it will simultaneously search for 5 extra metadata grabs at once rather than one by one, because some of these scrapers can be a little bit slow, especially when people are getting these emulation devices and their servers are getting a bit hammered. But ScreenScraper must have. Just a word on scrapers. Some apps do allow you to use IGDB or the GamesDB. The IGDB you normally don't need an account for, however I have found that the data it returns is pretty poor. It either can't match games, or it pulls incorrect data, or the data it does pull, very low quality, very poor. So ScreenScraper and SteamGridDB are the two you need. And finally, RetroAchievements. Now, if you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know how much I bang on about RetroAchievements. It's completely free, it's absolutely wonderful, it adds another layer and helps you get the most out of your retro games. Feel free to drop me a follow on Alex Won't Cook. In terms of the details you'll need from this, some emulators or front ends require your username and password, some of them require an API key, as I showed a moment ago with SteamGridDB. So all you need to do, if you tap your profile picture, go to Settings, and then if you scroll down, there's an option called API key. You can just tap it and it will give you that. So just finally, because I nearly forgot, we're going to fix the sound on the device. So we're going to download this app called O2P Tweaks. This was built for the Odin 2 portal, but it does work fine with the AYN Thor. So as before, we're going to grab the latest release. So you're going to get a warning that says it's an unsupported device, but I assure you it's absolutely fine. We're going to press this little burger menu, we're going to go to Tweaks, and all we're going to do is we're going to enable the James DSP Manager, and then we're going to install the James DSP Manager. We're going to give it the permissions to install the app. It's going to do it all for us. So this will allow us to set a profile. So we're going to just turn it off for now. So we're going to download a profile that I created. So if you come to my GitHub, this will be linked below. Come to the link, and then we're just going to grab that audiofix.tar file. Then we're going to go back to James DSP, and then we're going to press these three little dots. We're going to go to Presets, and we're going to press Add, and we're going to import that profile. There we go, and then once we've done that, we're going to give it a tap. So what I'll do is I'll just load up a little video, and then I'll show you the difference between the profile and the default sound. So let's take a proper look at ESU. So let's get started. So here we have our setup screen. So I'm just going to go through this. It's quite straightforward. You can just answer all the questions as you would normally. So we'll enable ESU DS. So there we are, an absolute night and day difference. That's it for this video. If you liked this video, I would appreciate a like. Make sure you subscribed, because there will be deep dive setup guides coming for each and every emulator and system that we cover. You'll want to tune in for those to make sure you've got the best setup going for your device. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Maple, are you sad because the people didn't subscribe yet? If they subscribe, would you feel better? Yeah, you would.